Good morning, everyone. I hope your Tuesday is off to a great start. Thank you for joining us. My name is Erin Kopek, and I'm the VP of Marketing here with HireLevel. We're super excited today about our topic. We have Summer Vanderbilt as part of the HireLevel team, talking all about the new navigating and compliance with the new Illinois leave law. And really just, she's been on a speaking tour over the last few weeks and answering questions, and she's our resident expert. And we wanted to extend this time to really educate you on how we can support your business and also just give you information to stay in compliance. I don't want to go without saying that thank you to the Leadership Council today and also the Glen Chamber of Commerce for extending really this opportunity to your network and allowing us to have a great audience today. So a few things before we get started, just so you know how the morning's going to run. So this will be less than an hour. There will be time for some Q&A, so feel free to think of questions throughout the presentation. We will have time at the end for Q&A, but if you're just dying to ask a question and want to make sure we get to it, feel free to type that into your question box or your chat box in your GoToWebinar panel. You're set up in listen only mode, so that will be the only way that you can chat with us today, but feel free to use that, and Summer will do her best to get to your questions. So today's 100% for you. We want to ask specific or answer specific questions about your business. So I'll be jotting those down, and we can get to those throughout the presentation. Again, thank you all for joining us this morning, and I'm going to pass it off to Summer.
All right, thank you, Erin. Let me get my screen set up here. So once again, I'm Summer Vanderbilt. I'm the Recruitment Development Manager here at HireLevel. I've been on the HireLevel team for almost 8 years. Here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be able to make that number 8. I really focus on a lot of recruitment, internal training, developing our team, and really navigating a lot of HR and compliance and working with businesses just like yours to really make sure they're understanding what they need to do to stay compliant, to really navigate new laws that come available and how it affects their business. I end up having a lot of conversations. I am a mom. I've got 2 kids that in my spare time, I do spend a lot of time with them, soccer games, gymnastics, you name it. So HR isn't all my life, but I spend a lot of time with my conversations circling around that. Disclaimer though, not a lawyer. I am just somebody who has researched this, done my best to really understand the facts so that I can just have better conversations with business owners. So what are the facts? What really is the Illinois Paid Leave for All Workers Act? A lot of the conversations I have are like, where did this come from? This came out of nowhere. I haven't heard anything about this. You would think with a law this large and this having such a big impact on so many different organizations throughout the entire state that we would be having lots more conversations about it, and we would be basically screaming from the rooftops, paid leave is coming. It was a law that was signed back in March of last year by the governor. So we've had about 9 months to kind of work through it. Now where it gets a little bit muddy, as I'm sure you know, even after it was signed, nobody really knew what it meant. Paid leave for all workers, 40 hours a year, but what are all the specifics that really surround this act, and how does it affect you as a business? It created a requirement for all Illinois employees to start accruing paid leave, not just full-time employees, but part-time employees, paid interns, anyone that is an employee paid by your company now has to start earning paid leave time. So it really breaks down to a minimum accrual of 1 hour for every 40 hours worked. When you take a look at the act, that's really the baseline for it. So an employee that works 40 hours a week, you can add 1 hour into their PTO bank. If it's a part-time employee that maybe works 20 hours a week, by the time they wrap up that second week, they're going to have an hour of PTO time. So that's how it does accrue. Employers do have the choice to cap their PTO balance at 40 hours through the plan year. Now, they can add more hours than that. That is something that employers can do. You don't have to stop it at 40 hours, but the way that this act is laid out, that is the requirement, is at least 40 hours. So when did accrual begin? We said that this law was signed last year, but when do employees have to actually start earning paid leave time? We're backing this up to January 1st. So all employees as of January 1st have to start earning time. Now, if they were your employee and they worked in November, December, and you did not have a PTO policy in place, you do not have to provide them PTO leave prior to January 1st. January 1st is that official start date of the Illinois Paid Leave Act. Now, if this is an employee that wasn't with you, of course, at January 1st, day one of employment is whenever they are going to start accruing time. So if they join your team February 1st, July 1st, that's going to be when the clock starts counting those hours. When employees use their time, they do have to be paid at their regularly hour wage of pay or minimum wage if they're paid on a tip commission base. So if you're thinking servers and waitresses, or even somebody maybe who works in sales and their job is all commission based, if they're wanting to use paid leave hours, then they would have to be paid at the minimum wage. And then, of course, this is the one that has a lot of people asking a lot of questions. Can there be restrictions regarding the paid leave? And we'll get into that in a little bit. But the Act does lay out that the leave may be used for any reason at any time if the employee wants to take the time. So when we talk about accruals, employers really have two different options that they can go. They can choose to let their employees accrue at an hourly rate, kind of what we hit on already, that 1 hour for every 40 hours that that employee works. Or they can go out and say, you know what, I'm going to take care of it at the beginning of the year and put 40 hours front loaded into a PTO bank for that employee. Either way, it's right. It's just based on the preference of the company and what they want to do. Then once again, employers may provide more paid leave time if they want. They don't have to cap it at 40 hours. If they want to let them accrue 1 hour for every 40 hours worked all year long and hit 52 hours, they can. If they want to front load those hours at the beginning of the year, they can do that as well. It really is their preference. There's just some things that they'd want to consider based on the two different options. If they choose to accrue those hours hourly, the 1 hour for every 40 hours worked, the employee's doesn't have to be able to use them until they hit 90 days of employment. So say just to keep it easy, January 1st is their first day of employment. They don't have the availability to use those hours until the end of March. After they hit their 90 days, they're accruing all of the time. I think it ends up being, if they're working a full 40-hour week, about 13 hours that they would have in a PTO bank to be able to use, but they're not able to use it until that 90 days is hit. Now, unused time that has been accrued does have to be able to be carried over into the next year if it is accrued on an hourly basis. An employer may put in their plan, though, that the hours that are accrued and carried over go towards the plan maximum. If you're capping it at that 40 hours a year that they're able to use, those rolled over hours, whether it be 3 hours, 5 hours, even 20 hours, you can make it go towards the plan maximum of 40 hours for the next plan year. Once again, all of this is if you are accruing at an hourly rate. If employers choose to take the front load option, there are some different things involved. They would then front load all of that leave time at the beginning of the year. Once again, the 40 hours, the full 40 hours would be available to the employee at the 90 days of employment. Entire 40 hours would be available as of the first day of the plan year or after the employee hits 90 days of employment. So what that means is that 90 days, they would then be able to use those hours. But the entire next year, whenever you go into the second plan year, after this employee has worked an entire year and you're front loading the 40 hours again, those hours would be available to them on day one. So January 2nd of year 2 of employment, they would then get an additional 40 hours. The difference between the accruals and the front load is that unused time is lost at the end of the plan year rather than rolling over into the next plan year. So it's more of a use it and lose it. You've had these hours since the beginning of time. You knew that you had a whole 40 hours you could have used any time during the year. It's not like they accrued this time in October and November and then January 1st is going to hit and they're going to lose those hours. It's more so you've had them all year to plan and use them. You should have used them. Notice of leave. So I'm sure if you've done any research at all looking into a paid leave plan or what you currently have in place for your employees, you might think, you know, they have to give me a leave. They can't just a notice of leave. They can't just say, hey, I'm taking off work. I'm using my PTO hours. There is some give and pull here with the rules that have been put down by the Illinois Department of Labor. Your employee policy can state that a notice of up to 7 days can be requested for a foreseeable absence. If they know that there is something coming up and that they're going to need to take time, you can request a 7-day notice. Now, if for some reason that request is unforeseeable, then employees then need to be able to tell their employer as soon as practically possible. I know probably a lot of you today, maybe your parents, maybe kids are off school today because of the weather. I know mine are. Thankfully, my husband was able to say, hey, I need to take off work this morning. He gave his employer, you know, a request that was, it was an unforeseeable request. We couldn't have told them 10 or 7 days ago that he would need to be off this morning. But he told them as soon as practically possible. That's an instance where this would come into place. But then, of course, there are things that come up where somebody needs off and needs to use this time, and it's something that happened very instantly and they weren't able to plan for. You cannot restrict somebody from using those hours if they weren't able to give you a notice. Your employer policy, though, may state that the employee may take at least 2 hours at a time. So they can't just say, you know, I'm going to be late. I just need to take an hour of my paid leave time. They have to use at least 2 hours in a block instead of taking an hour as soon as it's earned, or an hour every Friday so that they can leave at 4 o'clock rather than 5 o'clock. That's something, putting that wording into your policy is going to prevent that from being able to happen. Now, there are some restrictions. There are areas and opportunity for businesses to create their policy around this that prevents things from happening that would have an entire team from calling off or a specific day. You have to function. Your company has to be able to continue their operations. And I think this is something that sparked a lot of questions, a lot of concerns early on, because it was you just can't deny leave. But there are some things that you need to think about for your own company and instances that might keep you from doing business the way that you want. So the rules lay out very specific and limited conditions in which an employee may restrict the use of paid leave time. Instances that pertain to your business should be included in an employee policy, and any denial of paid leave should be disclosed to an employee in writing. Compliance is going to be a huge piece when it comes to just keeping track of the Illinois paid leave law and really making sure that your company is staying compliant. The rules state that paid leave may be denied under these specific conditions. Now, I took this word for word from the ruling because I want to make sure you have the best information of what those rules truly state when building out that policy. Limited circumstances may arise in order to meet the employer's core operational needs for a requested time period. Whether similarly situated employees are treated the same for the purpose of reviewing, approving, and denying paid leave. That's one of the things that they're going to look at. Is it, I'm just denying it because I don't like this employee, but this other employee, I'm going to approve it, but it's the same circumstances. Those are things that you really need to make sure are not happening. Whether granting leave during a particular time period would significantly impact business operations due to employer size. Some instances that may come into play here are restaurants and everybody wanting a specific Friday night off because maybe there's a big event going on in town. Maybe a lot of your staff are high school workers and there's something going on, a big football game or basketball game that they all want to go to, and everybody's thinking, wow, I've got this paid leave, I'm going to put in my time. I know a lot in the restaurant industry, it was, well, you can have the day off, but you have to find somebody to cover your shift. This new law is going to eliminate that. If they put in that time, you can no longer still say, hey, get somebody to cover your shift and you can have the day off. A lot of restaurant owners that I've talked to are like, they're all going to put this in and I'm not going to have anybody to run my kitchen, anybody to serve my tables. By having a language in your policy such as this, knowing that you can only grant leave to a particular amount of people at a specific time so that your business operations can continue, that's going to be key. And really figuring out what that is. Is it only one or two people are able to request leave at a time? What does that look like for your business? And what would really impact you from being able to operate successfully? Another reason that leave may be denied is that an employer provides a need or service critical to the health, safety, or welfare of the people of Illinois. Something that this may impact would be like a bus operation, bus drivers who are running the operations, and you really can't have a bunch of bus drivers call out within, just a couple hours and decide to use their time. Those bus routes have to continue on. And it's something that really impacts the people of Illinois, their transportation, and it would really be a trickle-down effect. And then employers must ensure the employee has adequate opportunity to use all paid leave time they are entitled to during the 12-month period. So if they are an employee that you're front loading it and they're planning to use this time, say in December, your plan year starts over again January 1st, and you deny their request and they won't have another opportunity to use that time before the plan year resets January 1st, then that's something that these rules state you cannot restrict that. You have to be able to show that they have adequate opportunity to use all of their paid leave time. So I hit on compliance just briefly. This is something that's really what's making this law stand out is the compliance piece of it. How you are keeping track of these records and not just saying, oh yeah, well, I'll deal with it when it comes up. This is something that we'll just see how it goes. Well, the law does state there are a lot of rules and compliance pieces around this. And we really don't want somebody to catch wind that maybe you aren't doing it correctly or up to par, because there's a 3-year window here. And you don't want a former employee to go to the Illinois Department of Labor and submit a complaint, so that they're going and checking all of your compliance pieces that go with this. So employers are required to keep a record of each employee's hours worked, paid leave accrued and taken, and the remaining paid leave balance for at least 3 years. So making sure that you have a great timekeeping system in place, that your records are great. You know when somebody requested leave. If somebody was denied leave, like we said, you need to provide it to them in writing, and you need to keep record of all of that for at least 3 years. Every time that they accrue hours, that needs to be in a safe place, whether you do it digitally, whether you have a really great paper system, which I don't recommend, but if that works for you, really having that at a place where you can easily access it and know what's going on. Employers are also required to provide an updated accrual balance to the employee upon request. Now, what really works great, obviously, is a check stub, having that balance listed right there. That's always provided to them, and they can resort to that. But I know a lot of people I've talked to, their go-to is Excel spreadsheets. They keep track of everything in an Excel spreadsheet, and they swear by it. So really, if you're able to pull that up and pull up that balance, employees, if they're asking for it, you need to be able to provide them that balance upon request. And like I said, employees have up to 3 years to file a complaint with the Illinois Department of Labor. If the Illinois Department of Labor comes in and sees that you aren't compliant, the company would then get a fine up to $2,500 plus wages owed to each employee instead of the paid hours that were not provided. So even if Jack is the employee, he's been gone for 2 years, he finds out about this. Oh yeah, I don't think at this location I was offered the paid leave. I would have known about that. That's something that I don't think was provided to me. It's really easy. Illinois Department of Labor, you just go up, they click complaint, they just have to fill out the information, and then they're going to come and check it out, see what's going on. They'll look back and see, okay, Jack didn't get Illinois paid leave. Neither did these other 20 employees. And you'll have to go and provide wages on those hours that were not earned. You don't want to do that. And of course, separation. What happens when an employee leaves your company, has time left over? Do you pay it out? Do you hold on to it? Really, what does that mean? So if an employee returns to an employer in less than 1 year's time, the paid leave that was accrued and unused is then reinstated to that employee. Leave time is then available at the start of reemployment. So what comes to mind when I hear this, especially this time of year, I know there's a lot of temporary employees at like little tax companies like H&R Block, that comes to mind. And they're working just the season, maybe not even long enough to hit those 90 days to start using the time that they've accrued, that entire 3 months that they've worked, maybe 4 months. So then that's something, maybe they do it every year. They go back and they work for the same company. Well, the following year, they have 13 hours or so built up. Day one of reemployment, that balance is going to be there for them to use. So that's something to keep in mind if you have employees that come and work seasonally for you. You know, if it's less than a year, that time is then reinstated to them. So another thing to consider is that when this law was put together, Illinois paid leave was able to be put into a category of its own for paid leave. I know a lot of companies are like, well, I have paid leave time. I already have a PTO policy in place, which is great. What they need to consider is if they want to separate this out as Illinois paid leave time, rather than a policy that gets roped into vacation, paid leave, earned time off, whatever you're calling it. By putting this into a category of its own, it keeps the employer from having to pay out that time upon separation. Now, I'm not saying that you can't. Now, if you feel that it's right by your employee that you want to pay that time out, they've earned it, you most definitely can. But by categorizing it as Illinois Paid Leave Act, paid leave time, then it's in a bucket all of its own. It makes it easier to track. It makes it easier to manage, in my opinion. You know that those 40 hours specifically are the ones that cannot be restricted. They can be used at any time. If you offer an additional 2 weeks of vacation leave, you can have more restrictions around that time if you need it. But the Illinois paid leave time, you just have, if you leave it in a bucket of its own, does not have to be paid out upon separation. So here are some things that we think are frequently asked questions that I've gotten, that I've seen, that I've talked through. There wasn't really a great place for them in here, and I hope maybe they'll answer some of the questions you guys have. So if you have a current PTO policy providing employees with more than 40 hours already, do we have to add an additional 40 hours of PTO? And that kind of hits on what we just said with separating it out. But no, as long as your plan, your PTO plan that you currently have, checks all of the boxes that are laid out by the Illinois Paid Leave Act, so you're able to provide those. You're able to provide those hours at any given time. You're compliant with it. You don't the restrictions and being able to tell people when they can and can't take it. As long as all of those boxes are checked, then you are fine. You may just want to review your record keeping for compliance, make sure that your employees are earning from day one rather than from 90 days, things like that. There might be a few adjustments you need to make. From time to time, people think, I've got 40 hours, we're good. But there are some things that probably need to be adjusted. A lot of people ask, what's the difference between vacation, PTO, and Illinois PTO? Why are we calling it all of these different things? Isn't time off just time off? And sick time, throw that in there as well. Once again, this act has a list of compliance mandated by the state. That's something that you don't want to mix up, that you don't want to ignore. You have the choice to put it all into one plan. But it can make changes to how accrued time is paid out upon separation. So if you include that in your regular PTO, regular vacation, you're saying we have a policy, it checks all of the boxes, it puts all of the things in here, and somebody goes to leave, you then need to pay that time out to them based on Illinois law. And if I choose the option to front load Illinois paid time off hours yearly on January 1st, do I have to provide employees who start mid-year the entire 40 hours? No, you do not. You are able to prorate this based on your new hire start date. It does need to be equivalent to what they would earn based on where they start within the year, but you are able to prorate it, and then the next year, January 1st, start off to a new fresh 40 hours. And what if I have part-time employees who will not work enough hours to accrue a whole 40 by the end of the year? Now, as long as they are accruing 1 hour for every 40 hours worked, then you'll meet the requirement. 40 is really the baseline of where we're going with, but as long as they're accruing 1 hour for every 40 hours worked, that will cover you there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to any questions you guys may have. We've covered a lot of information, and I truly feel like this is a topic that, even though these are the rules and these are the things that have been outlined by the state, it comes down to your business and how you operate and what you want to provide to your employees, and really what works for you operationally. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. I know the state did put out some, one size fits all rules for the entire state, but it's going to really leave it up to the business owners on how they choose to interpret it. All right, Erin, are there any questions in the chat that we can go over?
Yeah, I'm taking a look. So now's the time to put in your questions. I do see a couple here. Yes, the PowerPoint will be available. We will share the PowerPoint following the webinar today, the recording in case you missed it or want to share with anyone on your team. And then we will also be sharing a guide. So I know when you're thinking about updating policies and communicating this with your team, it can be intimidating. So we've put together a guide that can help you kind of navigate that as well. So Summer, we have Diana asking, do you foresee Illinois requiring reporting in the future?
I don't know. That is a good question. I don't see anything where they have asked for it or hinted at it. This act, like I said, it's been out since March, and it took almost the entire year to get the rules around it. It was an act that was passed very quickly, I believe. From some conversations I've had, they read it on a Friday and then passed it on a Monday. So going back and tracking some of those things and asking for reporting, I'm not sure what they will do. I haven't heard any conversation about that so far.
Someone else is asking too, if they already have vacation and already have sick time built into their policy, do they need to add a new bucket for this option?
That's really up to the company. Some that I've talked to, they have created a new bucket and adjusted the policy that they have in place. Whether they're offering, 2-3 weeks of vacation, maybe they've taken a week or so out of it and made it the Illinois paid leave, just because they want to make sure that they are monitoring those hours correctly. There are not any restrictions on them, so to speak, and really just making sure that they're going to remain compliant and do what the state laid out. But once again, that's preference.
What about any requirements regarding accruals for contract or 1099?
So there is not anything yet regarding 1099. I know that there have been some adjustments, I think federally, on some of those requirements. I have not read in closely on it as it doesn't fall into the Illinois Paid Leave Act. But I do expect that that is a topic at HireLevel we will be talking about in the near future.
This has been a hot question as well. What if everyone wants to take off during the holidays, Christmas time, for example? Are employers required to give them that time off?
So this really is going to be looking at your business needs, looking at what it takes to operate, and putting into a policy what restrictions you want to have in place. Is it you need a minimum of 4 people to operate, a minimum of 2 people? Like, what's going to keep your business needs from moving forward? And that's where you need to start. You can decline some of those, but you need to have it in your policy. You need to have it in writing. And whenever you decline those requests, you need to have that denial in writing as well, and keep those records for 3 years.
We have a question coming in about front loading and the accruals. Can you front load the 40 hours for full-time and set up an accrual policy for very part-time employees? Can you mix that up?
You can, yes, because obviously with part-time employees, you may think, okay, yes, their schedule is 20 hours a week or whatever it may be. And once you front load it, it's theirs, right? You can't do anything about it. You've provided them the hours, and you can't come back and say, oh, sorry, you didn't work, the hours that I expected you to work. You actually get, 38 hours instead of the 40 or whatever it may be. So you can create different plans and make it, my part-time employees are accruing on an hourly basis. So after every 40 hours, they get 1. But if you're full-time, your salary, I know that you're going to be working this X amount of hours, I'm going to front load. And you can differentiate those policies based on those employees.
We have a question about union labor. How is union labor treated in this act where vacation dues are paid on their behalf?
Okay, so I'm not sure on the union. I know that they have some special rules laid out on what the union is following, as well as like school districts and potentially some government. So they have some different rules that I really just looked in the general Illinois paid leave rules.
We have a few more coming in. Do you have to offer this to employees, or does it need to be included in the employee sign-up packet?
So this is mandatory. It's not something that can be offered. You have to provide this. I mean, I would definitely have a policy in place so that they know and you sign off on it and they understand everything about it. And have the conversations of what this means, what the act is, and how they can request the leave, how they need to communicate with their managers. Really go through all of those things, because you don't want somebody a few years down the road thinking, oh, when I worked at this employer, I was supposed to be offered paid leave and we never even had a conversation about it. You want them to know that it's there.
What if an employee is let go or fired?
So if they are let go or fired, and this is a policy that's in its own bucket, the Illinois Paid Leave Act, you do not have to pay it out to them. If it's roped in with your vacation and your PTO and everything else, then that is something that you will need to pay it out.
Can longstanding employees begin taking accrued hours immediately, or does everyone have to wait for the 90 days?
So once again, I mean, the rules state, right, that they have to wait until March 31st. But as an employer, if you are letting your employees go ahead and start accruing this time, and somebody wants to take time in February, go ahead and let them take it. If you want to let them take it and they're a great employee, they've been with you a long time, they have these hours to use. Really, the state just put that 90-day waiting period in there for us to, I think, kind of figure out what's going on and what we need to do with this. But if you have employees that want to go ahead and take their hours, let them do it. If you're comfortable with it, I'd say go for it. Another thing that kind of comes to mind is through the course of the year, right, they're accruing an hour for every 40 hours worked. But like I said, if they want to take a trip in February and they're looking at these hours, or if they're looking at the summertime or spring break, kids are out of school and they want to use this time, if you're comfortable with letting them maybe have a negative balance and accruing the time back, that's something you can consider as well. And just put into your policy, make sure you get it in writing with your employee that they sign off. They know they've gone into the negative, and if for some reason there is separation, then they would need to pay those hours back, and that they're aware that they're in the negative, but they're going to accrue it back over the next few weeks. Some of the things that I always see is if they're waiting, 40 weeks into the year to have a full 40 hours, and everybody has accrued at the same rate over the course of the year, and they're trying to use that 40 hours for a week vacation, everybody's going to try to use it at the same time. So, that last quarter of the year, a lot of us, that's our busy season. We can't have as many people off as we would like to. So consider that as well. Is there an option that you want to let them go into the negative to a certain extent? Maybe it's 20 hours into the negative because they're going to accrue that back. That's something to think about.
Someone asked about front loading the option and then they have to wait the 90 days. So we just asked that one.
Yeah, no, I think, so that got a little muddy earlier, and I do apologize for that. So when it is front loaded, there is still that 90-day waiting period. at the beginning of employment or now in this little 90-day period that the state has given us. Once the employee works the entire year and the plan resets again, then say January 1st, January 2nd, they're going to be provided a full 40 hours. So like an instance you may run into here, say somebody who has these hours and they wait and they want to use it the last week of the year. Maybe right at Christmas time, they're going to use their whole 40 hours. And then your plan resets on January 1st. Maybe they want to use another 40 hours again in January, but they just use that 40 hours. That's where you're going to see that. It resets again at the beginning of the plan year. So once that happens, then they'll be able to use it immediately.
Looks like there's still a couple questions on just employees being able to all request off on the same time. So it sounds like employers just need to build into their policy what those restrictions are based on business need.
Yeah, so we work closely with a manufacturing company on our employment services side of the business. And there are times that they will mandate Saturdays as overtime. And their fear has been, oh my goodness, we are going to have these mandated overtimes and everybody's going to try to put in their paid leave hours because they don't want to work it. So I believe they've written more of a policy that states like on mandated Saturdays, only 3 employees per certain department are able to put in leave. Like they've looked at their operations. They know exactly what they need to be able to operate and they have it on paper and the employee has to sign off on it. So they understand I can't just wake up and say, oh, it's 6 degrees outside. I don't want to go to work. It's Saturday. I've got all this going on. I'm just going to use my paid leave time. So they have those provisions in place. So looking at your business needs, what are some of those areas? You know, if you're a restaurant and you know Friday nights are your busiest nights and you can only have a maximum of 2 servers who are scheduled to be requesting off at that time, then that needs to be in writing, needs to be in your policy.
All right, we have another example coming in. If we currently have a weekly accrual that accounts for the 40 hours, but it is billed on employment year for accrual limits, do you think there is a need to adjust the accrual schedule? For example, the hours roll over at the end of the employment year and then hours continue to accrue based on accrual limits in the plan.
Okay, so they already have plans built on how long they've been with the company. I think as long as it hits the minimum, you should be okay. You just have to look at what does this mean when we have a new hire? A lot of companies are like, well, I don't plan on hiring anytime soon. Nobody plans on hiring anytime soon. We really hope that our team stays and that we're not going to have to add new employees there. But we know that's not always the case. And you don't want to be scrambling during a 2 weeks notice and trying to get somebody hired and getting all of their training prepped to figure out, oh, what are we going to do about their PTO? They're not accruing from day one. We've got this other plan in place. Is our plan compliant with Illinois paid leave? I would take a step back and just think big picture from day one, brand new employee, all the way full cycle. Does it match the rules? Are they taken care of from day one? And if that answer is no, if those accrual times don't really fit in with what they are offered on day one, then there might just be some slight adjustments.
And Christina, I know you have some questions regarding some sample verbiage. We can cover that offline. Summer will reach out to you after this and just share with you what we're talking with customers about. So we're happy to share that information and help where we can.
Right. That all the questions for now, Erin?
Yeah, that pretty much wraps us up.
All right, as I said, I'm having a lot of conversations about this. I'm happy to talk one-on-one with anybody and really figure out what kind of a solution you need to be having in place. If you're not familiar about HireLevel, we are an all-encompassing HR company. We hit on employment services, payroll services. We have an HRIS we provide that helps navigate all of these things. And then we do some consulting as well. So we help you track time, process your payroll, find your employees, fire employees if needed, and really want to just have a strategic partnership. So that's my information. You can contact me and have any of these conversations. Nicole, she is in the Edwardsville area and always happy to connect and work through anything, any questions you may have. We are always happy to do so.
Yeah, guys, please reach out. We're welcoming to share information, resources, and our expertise. Like I said, when we kicked off the webinar, we will be sharing the recording. I know you all might have been feverishly taking notes. Rest assured, we'll be sending out the recording. I'm happy to share the PDF of the presentation. And then for those of you still navigating the PTO policy updates, we are sharing a guide with you that will be in the email with the recording. So take a look at that, and we'll have that to you this afternoon immediately following the webinar. So feel free to reach out. We're here. Contact information is there, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.